News Talk is online. News Talk is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users. I'm your host, Gary Baumgarten. Well, today we have a very controversial subject and a very interesting guest. Her name is Holly Fretwell. She is a Montana State University professor who believes that children are being indoctrinated by educators who have political agendas on the global warming issue. She has written a book, The Sky's Not Falling, in which she claims that Hollywood stars and politicians are capitalizing on the changing climate for political purposes as well. She is particularly critical of former Vice President Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth, and of Lori David, who produced that film and authored a children's book, The Down-to-Earth Guide to Global Warming. Fretwell describes David's book as fear-inducing. Well, no matter what your opinion about global warming, you'll want to take advantage of this opportunity to talk to Holly Fretwell. Holly Fretwell, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Thank you for joining us. So let's get to the basics. Are we going through a climate change? Is the globe warming or not?
I don't think there's much question that the globe is definitely warming, just like it has many times in the past. We happen to be in a interglacial period following a previous ice age, and it is very natural for the Earth to be warming like it has recently.
So is this a result then of a natural progression that we see periodically, or are we as human beings contributing to this? And is it, as the former vice president suggests, a situation where if it continues, it could alter the cycle of life on this planet as we know it today?
Well, it appears as though it's a fairly natural cycle. There's a lot of uncertain science out there, however, when it comes to what sort of impact humans have. If we look at the trends of history, we are just following along those patterns of warming and cooling as we have in the past. We certainly, as humans, have put more CO2 out into the atmosphere, and it is a question as to whether that is going to impact this warming in a way different than in the past. And quite frankly, we don't know. Again, the science is very, very uncertain. There's a lot of climatologists out there looking at this, and for the most part, there's still a lot of questions. We just don't know very much about it.
Well, what's wrong with suggesting that we counter global warming by reducing greenhouse emissions? I mean, isn't that a good thing?
Well, it certainly is a good thing for us to try to have a cleaner and safer environment that exists out there. But we also want to think about what the costs are to clean it up even further than we have at this point. And sometimes those costs can be very grave. I think we do want a no-regrets policy. We want to do those things that we would do anyway, regardless of climate change, and try to have a nice environment. But to try to just reduce CO2 emissions all of a sudden, when even the models that we're looking at right now tell us that if we reduce those CO2 emissions, we're not likely to have a very large impact on the future temperature. It comes at great cost, and it appears as though the benefit would be rather small.
Well, I mean, what I'm hearing is that nations around the world, and there are actually 2 conferences going on simultaneously on this issue right now, one here in New York City at the United Nations, and the other simultaneously in Washington, where the President of the United States has invited the worst representatives of the nations who are the worst transgressors to discuss this. But, I mean, what's wrong with looking for reduced emissions in vehicles and looking to build hybrid cars? What's wrong with suggesting that factories around the world reduce pollutants? I mean, I understand that the jury is out on whether we are really contributing to this in any measurable way, but what's wrong with the message that Al Gore and others have, that we ought to be reducing global warming? And I guess maybe I asked and you attempted to answer it, but I still don't quite understand what's wrong with pushing for the things that these folks are pushing for.
Okay. I think it's wonderful if we have cars that can take us a little bit further on the same amount of gas, and if we can become more efficient and whatnot, again, to have a cleaner environment. But as we're doing this, we need to think about the cost of doing that. When we spend money on one thing, that's money we can't spend on something else. And if we're not going to get a big bang for our buck doing one thing, we might want to think about using those resources and putting them into another ballpark and doing something that's going to help society and that's going to help the environment and humanity even more, because resources are scarce and we need to allocate those resources very carefully. Sort of what this other camp is trying to encourage us to do, first of all, is telling us to be really scared and we're the bad guy and we're doing something terrible. And that's not really true. We don't know if what we're doing is a terrible thing. It doesn't appear as though it is, and in fact, if it is impacting the climate, it would be impacting it in a very small way, because there are so many other factors that exist out there. So I don't really like the scare tactics that are being used, and I also want to make sure we're aware of what that cost is and what else we could be doing. Again, if we're thinking about trying to make this world a better place for many people, having government force us to reduce our energy use is going to come at great cost to many people and not benefit a whole lot of people, particularly today and in the present time, but not even very much in the future.
My guest is Holly Fretwell. She is a professor at Montana State University, and she's the author of the new book, The Sky is Not Falling. And I want to talk about those scare tactics to which you just referred. As I gather, you are particularly concerned about the potential emotional impact of all this on our children.
Well, I am, and I guess a big part of that is because there's so much information that is out there and that's available to kids today that they really need to start to learn how to decipher what this information means. And when we inundate our children with sort of half-truths, if you will, many of them just fall into this trap and think this is the way it is, and they're scared, and they sometimes become rather pathetic and thinking, I can't do anything, this is just the way the world is, or they get overly aggressive and get angry with their parents because their parents aren't driving hybrid vehicles. Maybe their parents can't afford to drive a hybrid vehicle, or maybe they have enough kids that they need a larger car. Lots of different reasons why we all choose the different products that we do. Ultimately, in my book, it's not just talking about global warming, but it's really trying to get kids to learn how to think outside of the box. It's getting kids to learn how to question some of the information that's provided to them and to do a little research on their own to get some answers to tell them whether this information is true or not true, or if it's true in part or true in whole. So a big part of my book is really just trying to educate kids to deal with this plethora of information that they're now receiving via the internet, communications, etc.
Holly Fretwell is my guest. She's the author of the book, The Sky's Not Falling, and she says those who are claiming that it is are scaring the bejeebers out of us unnecessarily on the issue of global warming. We have a gazillion people, Holly, who want to talk to you. So let's go across the pond to London, and our first caller, Maria.
Yes.
Come on, Maria, make your point, please.
Okay. Yeah, I do believe, I think it's a scam, this, the global warming that the government is talking about. It's, I think it's a way of them to try and make money to get tax off us. They're saying here in the UK that they're talking about taxing people, on oil and everything. And I believe it's one big lie by the government. But however, I do believe that the pollution does cause bad health. If you breathe in the smoke of the car, it can be bad for your health, but I don't think it's a threat to the earth. And it's just, a con, really. And when you see on TV